I'm Marisol Farro. Everyone calls me Soul. I'm 33. And last Thanksgiving, my brother added me to the family group chat by accident. 61 messages. Every one of them about a sale they were planning without me for the third year running. My mother typed it out plain. Make sure Soul doesn't find out about the walkthrough. My brother replied right under it. Just tell her the closing's not until spring like last time. My father sent a shrugging emoji. I was sitting in a rental car outside a fire-damaged warehouse in Toledo, and I read every single word. I screenshotted all of it. And on Christmas morning, I typed one line back into that chat. Merry Christmas. Your title company will explain the rest. The group went dead. Then the calls started. 73 in 90 minutes. But here's what none of them thought to check. A document filed at the county recorder's office 7 years ago, signed by a woman who saw me more clearly than any of them ever bothered to. 61 messages showed me where I stood. One message showed them where the floor actually was. Welcome back to the channel. Quiet stories about ordinary people who stop apologizing for taking up space. If you've ever been the one left off the list, this one's for you. Drop a comment and subscribe so the next story finds you. It was a Wednesday in late November, and I was parked outside a burned-out furniture warehouse on the edge of Toledo, waiting on an adjuster's callback. I do property claims investigation for a regional insurance carrier. Commercial losses mostly, fires, storm damage, the occasional collapsed roof. I'd been on this file 4 days, photographing char patterns and writing up a scope of loss, eating gas station sandwiches in my car between site visits. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat around 6. Then again. I picked it up and saw a group I'd never been added to. A thread titled with a turkey emoji, the word Farro, and the word planning. 61 messages stacked underneath like a pile of claims nobody wanted to process. My brother Dominic had sent a private text right after. Wrong chat, ignore, my bad. Too late. I was already scrolling. The first few messages were logistics. Piper, my younger sister, asked if everyone could make it to the house for Thanksgiving itself. Mom confirmed. Dad sent a thumbs up. Normal enough. Then the conversation shifted. Message 8, Mom, we should serve in the good dining room this year, Soul won't be there to complain about the folding table. Message 9, Dominic, finally, one holiday without the third degree. I kept scrolling. My name showed up exactly 0 times in the planning and exactly 5 times in the managing. Message 11, Dominic. Just tell her the closing's not until spring, like last time. Message 14, Mom, we'll say the walkthrough got pushed. She doesn't need exact dates. Message 16, Dad, a shrugging emoji. Message 23, Piper, what if she actually shows up at the building? Message 24, Mom, she won't. She never does anymore. I put the phone down on the center console. Picked it up. Put it down again. 61 messages, and not one of them invited me. 5 of them made sure I'd stay away. I should tell you who I am, because it matters for what comes next. I've been a commercial property claims investigator for 9 years, licensed, methodical, the kind of person who reads the fine print on a policy twice before I sign off on a payout. I spend maybe half my year on the road, staying in extended stay hotels, writing damage reports at rest stops, eating dinner alone off a laptop. I'm good at my job because I'm patient with paperwork and I never skip the step everybody else finds boring. Those have never once been qualities my family found interesting. Growing up in Danforth, Ohio, I was the middle kid who did her homework early while Dominic ran cross-country and Piper did competitive dance. Mom drove them to meets. Dad kept the trophies dusted on a shelf in the den. I rode my bike to the library. That was fine, I told myself. Reliable. People get overlooked, and I kept telling myself that for a long time. I sent the holiday cards on time every year. I organized Mom's 60th birthday dinner 2 years running. When Dad needed a ride to the hospital for his knee surgery, I drove 4 hours on a Tuesday to do it. When the building's boiler died one January and Dominic was too busy to deal with the tenants, I called the HVAC company myself from a hotel room in Michigan and put the deposit on my own card. I never asked to be thanked. I just assumed being useful was the same thing as being included. And still, last Thanksgiving, I drove to the house with a green bean casserole and a bottle of wine on the date they'd given me, and the driveway was empty. Lights off. I called Mom. She picked up on the 4th ring, voice bright. "Oh honey, I thought we told you, we moved it up a day, it was last minute." I stood on the porch with the casserole cooling in my hands and said, "That's okay, my fault for not double-checking." It was not my fault. And it was not last minute. I just didn't know that yet. Back in the car, still reading, I hit message 29 and my stomach dropped. Dominic had typed, "Closings tentatively set for the 2nd week of January, keep Seoul clear till after." Closing. I read it 3 times. Closing on what? 2 messages later, Mom, Marlene says the buyer wants a final walkthrough over the holiday week, so we need the building looking presentable and Seoul nowhere near it. Marlene. A buyer. A walkthrough. They were selling something, and whatever it was, they needed me out of the way to make it happen. I set the phone face down on the console and stared through the windshield at the burned warehouse, and the only thing I could think about was my grandmother's building. Grandma Opal's building. The Aldine, 3 stories of red brick on Main Street in Danforth, a bakery on the ground floor that had been there since before I was born, 6 small apartments above it, one on each side of the 3rd floor with slanted ceilings and windows that looked down onto the street lamps. She'd owned it outright since 1979. I'd lived in the smaller of those 2 top apartments for 8 months after my divorce, when I couldn't afford first and last month's rent anywhere else and didn't want to ask my parents. Grandma Opal let me stay for whatever I could manage, made coffee every morning at 6, and told me to keep my chin up and not worry about the rest. That building was the only place I never had to explain why I was there. I have a key to it still, a heavy brass one for the side entrance, cut in a style the hardware store on Main doesn't stock anymore. Grandma Opal gave it to me the year she turned 80, in front of the whole family at her own birthday dinner. She pressed it into my hand and said, "This is yours whenever you need it, Marisol." Mom rolled her eyes. Dominic checked his phone. Piper was 16 and filming something for a video she never finished. None of them thought it meant anything. But the key wasn't the real gift. I understand that now. The phone buzzed again on the console. I picked it up. I kept reading. Message 34 was the one that did it. Mom, all capital letters. Make sure Seoul doesn't find out about the walkthrough. Not whispered, not implied, typed in black and white and sent to 4 people who all reacted with a thumbs up. 2 messages later, Dad. My father, Curtis Farro, 66 years old, the man who taught me to check my own oil in the driveway, sent a laughing emoji, tears streaming off the cartoon face. He didn't type a single word. He just laughed. I want to be clear about something. I didn't screenshot those messages to use as ammunition. I did it because I was sitting alone in a rental car outside a burned building and my chest was tight and I needed proof that I wasn't imagining this. I'd spent years telling myself the wrong dates were honest mistakes and the missed calls were everyone just being busy. 61 messages killed every excuse I'd ever built for them. They weren't forgetting me. They were coordinating around me. There was a buyer, a walkthrough, a closing date, and a plan to keep me blind while they did whatever they were doing with the one place that had ever felt entirely mine. I sat in that parking lot until the streetlights came on, reading the thread forward and backward. And the word that kept circling was again, like last time, which meant last Thanksgiving wasn't an accident either. The casserole, the empty driveway, the bright voice on the phone, all of it the same play, run twice. My thumb hovered over the call button next to Mom's name for a long time. I pictured the conversation. I'd say I saw the chat. She'd go quiet. Then she'd cry. Then she'd tell me I was being paranoid. Then I'd end up apologizing for making her feel bad about making me feel invisible. I'd run that math before. I knew the answer. So I pulled my thumb back and locked the phone. I sat with both hands flat on the steering wheel, the way I sit when a claims file doesn't add up, still, focused, looking for the number that doesn't match the drawing. And I asked myself one question. What exactly are they selling? Because closing is real estate language. A buyer and a walkthrough are real estate language. Marlene is a person who arranges those things. If they were selling the Aldine, that was a problem, but it was also a question, because Grandma Opal had died 4 years earlier, and the building should have gone through her estate, or a trust, or something formal. Nobody had ever told me what happened to it. Nobody had asked me to sign anything. Nobody mentioned an attorney or a closing date until 61 messages fell into my lap by accident. So before I said one word to anyone, I needed to know what I was actually dealing with. Not the feelings. The paper. The recorded, filed, notarized paper. I drove back to my hotel that night and opened my laptop and typed the Danforth County Recorder's office into the search bar. While the county site loaded slowly, the way small government portals always do, I unclipped my keyring from my bag and held the brass key under the lamp. For keys, my apartment, my car, my company badge, and that one, thicker than the rest, a little tarnished, square-shouldered. I'd carried it for 7 years and never took it off the ring, even after Grandma Opal died, even after I stopped visiting the building because it hurt too much and because nobody ever invited me back there anyway. The night she gave it to me, her 80th birthday, she'd pulled me into the hallway after the cake, the whole family still laughing in the living room. She took the key off a hook by her coat closet and pressed it into my palm. "This is yours whenever you need it, Marisol." She said it loud enough that Mom looked up. Dad glanced over. Dominic didn't. Piper was filming a slow pan of the dessert table. Mom smiled the tight smile she uses when she thinks someone's being dramatic. "She's not homeless," Mom said. Grandma Opal didn't look at her. She looked at me. "Keep it," she said. I didn't understand then why she said it like that, like she was handing me something heavier than metal. The county recorder page finally loaded. I typed in the address, 214 Main Street, Danforth, Ohio. The wheel spun. I set the key on the desk beside the laptop and waited. The site was basic, white background, blue links, a search bar that looked like it hadn't been touched since a previous decade. I got a list of documents tied to 214 Main. The original purchase deed from 1979, when my grandparents bought the building outright. A release of an old mechanic's lien in 1994. And then one more entry, a quitclaim deed recorded 7 years ago, with a document number I could click. I clicked it. The scan loaded slow, grainy, tilted slightly on the page, the way county scans always are. At the top, quitclaim deed. Grantor, Opal Marguerite Farro. Grantees, plural. Line 1, Renata Louise Farro. Line 2, Marisol Elena Farro. Tenants in common. I read it again. And again. This wasn't a family tradition or a sentimental gesture. This was a recorded legal instrument stating I owned half of that building. Not symbolically. On paper, filed with the county, indexed, searchable by anyone with a browser and the address. I sat back and let the chair roll a few inches. Grandma Opal hadn't just given me a key. She'd given me the deed, and she'd done it through the proper channel, with a notary stamp and a filing number, because she must have known a key can be taken back, but a recorded document can't be wished away. She hadn't been sentimental. She'd been precise, quietly, without asking permission from anyone in the family who would have talked her out of it. I pulled up the rest of the filings. No subsequent transfer. No deed from me to anyone else. No court order. No release of my interest. My name was still on that building the same way it had been since the day she signed the paper. The county recorder didn't care that I hadn't set foot in the Aldine in 3 years. It didn't care that my family had stopped setting a plate for me. It only knew what was filed. And what was filed said Marisol Farro was an owner. I remembered the day she signed it. I was 26, home for a weekend because Grandma Opal had called and asked me to come. She'd had a minor cardiac episode 2 months earlier, nothing dramatic, the kind of thing doctors call a warning rather than an event. She was sharp again by the time I arrived, standing at her stove making chicken soup like nothing had happened. But she had an appointment the next morning, she said, and she wanted me along. I assumed it was medical. It wasn't. We drove to a small storefront office 2 blocks from the Aldine, a notary who also did tax returns. She had the papers already drawn up. She sat across from him and explained, calm as anything, that she wanted to add me to the title. Tenants in common, she said, like she'd practiced it. So the building doesn't get tangled up when I'm gone, and so Marisol has something that's actually hers. She signed. I signed. He stamped it, and we dropped the original off at the recorder's office on the drive home. The whole thing took 35 minutes. When we got back, Mom was in the kitchen. Grandma Opal told her straight out, didn't hide it. Mom's face went flat. You're putting soul on the title. Not me. Grandma Opal poured 2 mugs of coffee and handed me one. You're already on it, Renata. Now Marisol is too. Mom's jaw tightened. This is dramatic, Mom, she doesn't even live in Danforth anymore. Grandma Opal didn't argue. She just said, the paper's filed. It's done. I remember feeling awkward, like I'd been handed something I hadn't earned in front of someone who thought I didn't deserve it. I thanked her and changed the subject. I didn't understand what she'd actually given me. I understand it now. Back at the hotel, 2 in the morning, I had the deed scan open in one tab and the group chat screenshots in another. I toggled between them the way I cross-reference a scope of loss against field photos. The deed said I was a co-owner. The chat said they were selling. And the math was simple. You cannot easily sell a commercial building when someone else's name sits on the title. That's not a loophole. That's property law. If my name was on the deed, recorded and searchable in the county's own database, no title company would clear a closing without questions. No lender would fund a purchase on a clouded title. The sale might not die instantly, but it would stall hard, and stalling a commercial closing over the holidays is close enough to killing it. I closed the laptop, lay on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. The air handler in the room clicked on and off. My phone sat dark on the nightstand, finally quiet after hours of buzzing. I thought about calling Grandma Opal, which was reflex, for years gone, and I still reached for her number when nothing made sense. She would have known exactly what to do. She always did. She'd planned 7 years ahead and filed the paper that proved it. She hadn't told me what to do with it, because she trusted I'd figure it out when the time came. I turned on my side and looked at the brass key on the desk, sitting beside the laptop like a small patient witness. The county recorder confirmed what Grandma Opal had set up. My family confirmed what they were trying to do. The only question left was what I would do with both pieces of information. I didn't have an answer yet, but I had something better. I had time. The closing was tentatively the second week of January. It was November 20th. About 7 weeks. I need to stop here for a second. If you're watching this and part of you is doing the math on your own family, who would notice if you went quiet, who only calls when they need a signature, I see you. Subscribe and stay with me, because what I found in that county database is exactly why I never raised my voice. Not once. The next morning, Mom called. I let it ring 3 times before I picked up, because I needed 3 rings to flatten my voice into something ordinary. "Hi, sweetheart," she sounded warm. She always sounds warm right before she wants something to go smoothly. "So Christmas, we're keeping it small. This year, just the 4 of us at the house, you know how it gets. But if you're back from your work trip by the second week of January, swing by, we'll do a little something then." The second week of January. There it was, delivered right on schedule, exactly as the chat had scripted it. I held the phone away from my ear and looked at the screenshot still open on my laptop. Message 14. Renata, we'll say the walkthrough got pushed. She doesn't need exact dates. She was reading from her own script. That sounds fine, Mom, I'll check my calendar. Perfect, don't bring anything fancy. She laughed. I didn't. I said goodbye and sat very still for a long time. The worst part wasn't the lie. I'd been lied to before, about schedules, about whether they'd gotten the gift I mailed. The worst part was how easy it was for her. The rhythm of her voice, the manufactured warmth, the little laugh at the end, all of it practiced, all of it aimed at keeping me exactly where I was, far away, uninformed, grateful for whatever leftovers I was offered. I saved the call log, just the timestamp. November 21st, 9:52 a.m., duration 1 minute 58 seconds. Under 2 minutes to lie to your daughter. She didn't even need 3. 2 days later, Piper called. She didn't mean to tell me anything. She just talks too much when she's nervous. She started with small talk, her job at the dental office, a guy she'd been seeing, a complaint about her landlord. Then she mentioned Dominic, and her voice shifted. He's really stressed, the business isn't doing great. Dominic ran an HVAC and mechanical contracting company on the county line, opened 5 years earlier with a loan Mom had co-signed. I knew about the loan because Mom had mentioned it proudly once, at a dinner I was actually invited to, one of the last ones. How bad? I asked. Piper paused. Bad. Like, collection letters bad. Mom's on it too because she co-signed, so if he defaults, she trailed off. I didn't push. I didn't need to. The picture assembled itself. Dominic's business was failing. The co-signed loan meant Mom's credit and probably her savings were exposed. And selling the Aldine, free and clear, income-producing, worth real money on Main Street, was the fastest way to close the gap. The building had no mortgage. In a market like Danforth's, a 3-story mixed-use property with a stable tenant downstairs might bring $300, maybe $320. Enough to clear the loan. Enough to bail Dominic out and get Mom off the hook. Enough to matter. And there it was, the shape of the thing I hadn't been able to see from the chat alone. This wasn't about hating me. It was financial triage, and I was the complication they'd decided to route around rather than include. They hadn't cut me out because they were angry. They'd cut me out because including me would mean admitting they needed something from me, And admitting that would mean treating me like someone whose answer mattered. That was the part they couldn't stomach. All they needed was one signature they assumed I'd hand over without reading the fine print, or better yet, one signature they could avoid needing entirely if they just kept me out of the room. Piper circled back to small talk. I let her. Before we hung up, she said something that stuck. We just didn't think you'd care about the old building anymore. I wrote the sentence down on the hotel notepad, word for word. 3 days after that call, I stopped at the post office on Main Street to mail a claims report and ran into Louisa Bennett coming out with a stack of parcels. Louisa had run the bakery on the ground floor of the Aldine for almost 20 years, since back when Grandma Opal still did the books herself at the little desk behind the ovens. Marisol Farro, Louisa said, setting her boxes down on the hood of her car. I'm still a little sore at you, you know. I asked what I'd done. 2 years ago, the County Historical Registry put together a walking tour packet on Main Street buildings, she said. They wanted a family interview about the Aldine, its history, the original tenants, that sort of thing. I gave them your name. Your mother called them back and said you weren't available and weren't really involved with the building anymore. I stood there on the sidewalk holding my envelope. Louisa, I said slowly, nobody ever contacted me about that. She frowned. That's odd. They said your mother answered for the family. Said you'd moved on from all that. Before I tell you what, she said, waving a hand, you should know it wasn't the only time. The Tenants Association sent a letter about a facade grant program the year before, addressed to the building's owners of record. Your mother handled the reply on that too. Said the second owner, meaning you, preferred not to be contacted directly regarding building matters. I hadn't known there was a second owner listed anywhere official until that moment except in the county's own files. Which meant somebody besides me had gone looking at the deed years before I ever thought to. My mother had known exactly what those 2 words, tenants in common, meant the whole time. She just never once mentioned it to me. I thanked Louisa, got in my car, and sat in the post office parking lot with the engine off for a long time, doing the math on how many doors, exactly, had quietly been closed in my name before I ever opened the county website myself. The following week, back home between assignments, I downloaded the full deed scan and saved it to a folder labeled 214 Main. 2 pages. Page 1, Standard Quitclaim Language, Opal Marguerite Farro, Grantor, does hereby quitclaim to Renata Louise Farro and Marisol Elena Farro, as tenants in common, followed by the legal description, parcel ID, all stamped and recorded. Page 2, Grandma Opal's signature, mine, the notary's seal, the filing date. I printed both pages at a copy shop and put them in a folder. It weighed almost nothing. Tenants in common. I looked it up carefully by then. It meant Mom and I each owned an undivided interest in the whole property, not half the bakery and half the apartments, half of everything. And the critical part, neither of us could sell the whole building without the other's consent. Mom couldn't convey my interest. She couldn't sign for me. She couldn't close a sale transferring 100% of 214 Main to a buyer unless I signed too. If she tried, the title company would flag it the moment they ran the search. Which meant one of 2 things. Either they hadn't told the title company about me, or they had, and the plan was to get my signature separately, framed as something else. I went back to the screenshots. Message 29, Dominic, closings tentatively second week of January. Message 31, Mom, Marlene says the buyer wants a final walkthrough. Marlene. I searched Marlene Yin Commercial Real Estate Danforth, Ohio, and found her in about 4 seconds. Yun and Bregman Commercial Realty, small brokerage on the courthouse square, headshot in a blazer. She had the listing for 214 Main on her page. Mixed use, ground floor tenant in place, 6 residential units above, asking $310,000. Listed 5 weeks earlier. I stared at the listing photos. Someone had staged the vacant top-floor apartment, my old apartment, replacing Grandma Opal's rocking chair with a gray love seat I didn't recognize. The hallway had been repainted a flat white. The little reading nook by the window where she used to do her crosswords was gone, filled instead with a rental catalog side table. They'd erased her before they'd even finished selling what she built. They'd been preparing this for weeks, maybe longer. And the closing was set for the week after the family gathering I was being steered away from. I did the math. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd excluded me because keeping me away from the building was a logistical requirement for the sale. If I showed up, I might see the staging. I might ask about the new tenant lease terms. I might notice the lockbox. The wrong date wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was project management. I was a variable they needed to control. I opened a blank document and typed one line. Do not react. Do not confront. Let the paper work. Then I closed the laptop and went to bed. I didn't sleep much. A few days later I called a real estate attorney, not a family friend, a licensed attorney in Columbus I found through the state bar's referral line. I explained the situation in about 4 minutes. Co-owner on a recorded deed, tenants in common, property listed for sale, closing scheduled. Nobody had asked me to sign or informed me of the transaction. He was quiet a moment, then said, "That closing is almost certainly not happening without you." I asked him to be specific. He said no title company he'd ever worked with would issue a clear policy if a recorded co-owner hadn't signed the conveyance. A lender, if there was one, would require clear title before funding. Even in an all-cash deal, no competent closing agent would proceed knowing there was an unreleased interest sitting on the deed. Your signature isn't optional, he said. It's structural. I asked what would happen if they tried anyway. He said the title search would flag my name, the closing would stall, and the buyer would likely walk or renegotiate. If my family wanted to force a sale without my agreement, they'd need to file a partition action, a lawsuit heard in open court, public record, months of process. In my experience, he said, families don't want that. I thanked him, paid the consultation fee, and hung up. I wrote one sentence from the call on the hotel notepad and underlined it twice. Your signature isn't optional. It's structural. I could have called Mom that night with everything I had, the screenshots, the deed, the attorney's confirmation, and made her explain herself. But I'd sat through enough conversations with Marisol Farro to know how they end. She cries. She reframes. She tells me I'm hurting her by being hurt. And somewhere around the 12-minute mark I find myself apologizing for noticing what she did. Not this time. I didn't want a confrontation. I wanted a process, an outcome that didn't depend on anyone feeling guilty, because guilt requires a conscience, and I was no longer sure there was one reserved for me. I've spent my career reading the details other people skip past, the clause in the policy, the exclusion buried on page 9. I believe in systems, and the system already had my answer. The deed was filed. The title search would find it. The closing would stall. I didn't need to raise my voice. The county recorder's office had already spoken for me 7 years ago. So I decided. I wouldn't sign anything. I wouldn't confront anyone. I would contact the listing agent directly, identify myself as a recorded co-owner, and let the title company do exactly what title companies do. Verify ownership, flag the discrepancy, and halt the closing until every legal interest holder had been consulted. I wasn't going to shout the truth. I was going to file it. And on Christmas morning, after they'd gathered and toasted their good fortune and congratulated themselves on keeping me in the dark, I would send one message into that same chat and let the paper handle the rest. I emailed Marlene Yun that week. Kept it professional, the same tone I use writing up a claims summary for underwriting. Dear Ms. Yun, my name is Marisol Farro. I'm writing regarding 214 Main Street, Danforth, Ohio, currently listed through your office. I am a recorded co-owner of this property as a tenant in common, per a quitclaim deed filed with the county recorder 7 years ago. I have not been contacted regarding the pending sale, nor asked to sign any conveyance documents. I'd appreciate confirmation of the transaction status. I attached the deed scan and sent it. Marlene called 4 hours later, voice professional but tight, the sound of someone recalculating a commission in real time. Ms. Farro, thank you for reaching out. I've reviewed the deed and pulled the title report. I need to verify a few things with the title company. She called back the next morning. The search confirmed my name. The closing, she said carefully, could not proceed as currently structured without my participation. She asked if I'd spoken with the other owner, my mother, about the sale. No, I said, I learned about it through other channels. A pause. I see. I'll need to inform the seller and the buyer's agent there's an unresolved ownership issue. That's fine, I said. I'd prefer all communication go through my attorney from here. I gave her his contact. She thanked me and hung up. The fuse was lit. I didn't need to touch it again. Quick pause. If you've made it this far, you already know I'm not going to scream at anyone. That's not the win. The win is quieter, and it's coming. Hit subscribe so you don't miss how one line in a group chat ended a closing worth more than my brother's whole business. 2 weeks before Christmas, a PDF landed in my email from Mom. No subject line, one line of text. Soul, can you sign these and send back before the holidays? Just routine paperwork from Grandma's estate. Thanks, Mom. I opened it. The first page was not routine estate paperwork. It was a deed of conveyance transferring all interest in 214 Main Street from Renata Louise Farro and Marisol Elena Farro to a buyer, a holding company called Castle Point Ventures, for a purchase price of $310,000. My signature line was on page 3, flagged with a yellow tab and the word sign in Piper's handwriting. I recognized the loopy S. The purchase price was listed. The legal description matched 214 Main down to the parcel number. Page 4 was a disbursement schedule showing the entire proceeds routed to a single account. Mom's. Not split. Not shared. 100% of the sale price minus closing costs. They didn't just want my signature to erase my ownership. They wanted me to do it for free. They hadn't even tried to hide it. They'd simply bet I wouldn't read past the tab. Just initial where it's marked, sweetheart, don't overthink it. I could hear the sentence fully formed in my head, ready to deploy the moment I called to ask a question. I saved the file, forwarded it to my attorney, and did not sign. I didn't reply to Mom's email either. I left it sitting there, read but unanswered, the same way they'd left me standing on a porch with a green bean casserole the year before, acknowledged just enough to confirm I existed, then ignored. That night I held the brass key in my closed fist and thought about Grandma Opal. Not the grantor on a quitclaim deed, the real one, the woman who kept a rent ledger and a hardbound notebook she updated by hand every month for 40 years, who noticed when I was quiet and never once told me I was too sensitive for noticing what I noticed. She signed that deed because she saw this coming, maybe not the specifics, not Dominic's failing business or Mom's fear or the PDF disguised as routine paperwork, but the shape of it. She saw that I'd be the one they routed around. And she put my name on the one thing they couldn't route around without me. That wasn't sentimentality. That was engineering, in her own handwriting, 40 years of it. The key was warm from holding it. It wasn't a keepsake anymore. It was a title. Proof that someone had looked at me and said, without words, but with a notary stamp, she belongs here. I typed my one message into the chat's draft field and saved it. I'd send it Christmas morning. I finished my current assignment 2 days early. My supervisor said I could take the rest of the week. I drove home to my own apartment instead of to Danforth, unpacked, did laundry, and sat at my own desk for the first time in a month. The folder was in my bag. I took it out and set it beside the brass key on the desk, like a paperweight. Both things from Grandma Opal, both quiet, both loaded. I opened the group chat one more time. The conversation had continued without me. More logistics. Piper asked if she should bring pie. Dominic confirmed the walkthrough time with the buyer's rep. Mom reminded everyone to keep things normal if Sol texted. Dad hadn't typed anything new. He didn't need to. His laughing emoji still sat there in the scroll like a monument to indifference. I looked at my saved draft. I'd written and rewritten it for weeks, and every version kept shrinking until it was one short line. Merry Christmas. Your title company will explain the rest. No accusation, no emotion, no exclamation marks. I wasn't going to explain what I knew or how. I was going to point them toward the one person who had the paperwork in front of her and the professional obligation to say it out loud. Christmas Eve, the chat lit up one more time. Dominic posted a photo of the building, freshly staged, string lights on the bakery awning, a wreath that wasn't Grandma Opal's on the side door. Piper replied with heart emojis. Mom typed, tomorrow's going to be perfect, remember, nobody mentions Sol, she thinks it's the second week of January. Dad sent a Santa emoji. I read it from my couch with a mug of tea going cold in my hands. Nobody mentions Sol. 3 words summarizing years of holiday math. It wasn't casual. It was policy. I thought about what the next morning would look like from their side. Dominic relieved, talking through the walkthrough schedule. Mom fussing with napkins, satisfied everything was on track. Dad quiet in his recliner. Piper setting the table for 4 instead of 5, not counting the absence anymore because she'd stopped years ago. They'd raise a glass. They'd feel good about the closing and good about the holiday, certain the one person who could complicate things was 2 hours away, believing the party was in January. Christmas morning. I woke early, made coffee, sat at my desk. The messages were already flowing. Merry Christmas from Piper with a tree emoji. Morning family from Dominic. Mom sent a photo of the table set for 4, white plates, evergreen napkins, 4 chairs. I counted them the way I count line items on an estimate, precisely, without emotion, because the number is the number. At 9:41, I tapped the draft I'd saved weeks earlier and hit send. Merry Christmas. Your title company will explain the rest. One line, no emoji, no drama, just a sentence and a period. I set the phone on the desk, screen up, and watched. The typing indicator appeared under Piper's name, then vanished. Appeared under Mom's, vanished. Dominic's blinked for a full 10 seconds, then nothing. The chat that had been cheerful 4 minutes earlier went completely silent. The kind of silence that doesn't mean nobody has anything to say, it means everybody has too much. I picked up my coffee. Still warm. I took a sip and waited. 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. The typing bubble came and went 5 more times. Nobody could figure out what to say, because my message didn't give them anything to argue with. I hadn't accused. I hadn't cried. I'd simply pointed them at Marlene Yun, who by then had already left a voicemail explaining that the title had an unresolved co-ownership issue and that the January closing was suspended pending review. The phone stayed quiet 4 more minutes. Then it started ringing. Dominic first. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. Piper tried 3 times in 90 seconds. I watched the screen the way I watch a seismograph reading. Then Mom. Her name flashed over and over, the phone sliding an inch across the desk each time it buzzed. I didn't pick up. Dad texted, the first actual text he'd sent me in months. Call your mother. I read it and set the phone back down. I opened a notes app and started a tally, because I'm an investigator and that's what I do with data. I track it. Dominic, 11 calls in the first 15 minutes. Piper, 7. Mom, 19. Dad, 2 calls, 2 more texts, both just call home. Piper sent a private message. So what does that mean? What title company? Please call me back. I didn't reply. Mom left a voicemail. I played it once. Her voice was high, cracked, fast. Sol, I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to call me right now. This is a family matter and you are blowing this completely out of proportion. Blowing it out of proportion. The woman who'd orchestrated years of fake dates and managed exclusion was telling me I was overreacting. I played it a second time, not to hear it again, just to make sure the saved recording came through clean. It did. Dominic left 1-2, shorter, angrier. You had no right to go behind our backs. Behind our backs. As if the chat I was never meant to see was somehow the front door. I saved that voicemail next to the 61 messages and the deed scan and the fake estate PDF. The phone kept buzzing. By 11:11, exactly 90 minutes after I'd sent the message, the tally read 73. 73 calls. I wrote the number down, circled it, and set the pen aside. For 3 years they couldn't be bothered to dial my number on a holiday. Now they couldn't stop. Here's what I learned later, pieced together from Piper's version and what Marlene confirmed through my attorney. Marlene had left Mom a voicemail on the 23rd, professional courtesy. The title search had flagged a co-owner who hadn't been consulted. She recommended pausing the closing until it was resolved. Mom never told anyone. She figured she'd smooth it over herself after the holiday, maybe tell Marlene I was estranged and wouldn't be an issue. She buried the message the way she'd buried every complication I ever represented, quietly, on her own timeline. Then my line landed in the chat, and Marlene's voicemail stopped being a problem she could postpone. Dominic called Marlene at 10:15 Christmas morning. She told him what she'd already told Mom. The title showed 2 owners. Only one had authorized the sale. The closing couldn't proceed until the second owner either consented or the matter was legally resolved. He asked what that meant. She explained a partition action, filed in court, a matter of public record, potentially months. She said the buyer had already been notified and was considering withdrawing. According to Piper, Dominic hung up, walked back to the table, set his phone down between the white plates and the evergreen napkins, and said, "She's on the deed, the whole thing's dead." Mom sat down hard, hand over her mouth. Dad stared at his plate. The same man who'd sent a laughing emoji weeks earlier had nothing on his face at all. The room stayed silent, Piper said, for a full minute. Nobody touched the food. Finally Dominic said, "We need a lawyer." Mom's chin trembled. "She's ruining everything," she said it twice. Nobody disagreed and nobody corrected her. Piper went to the kitchen and called me for the 8th time. I didn't answer that one either. At 11:20, I called back. 1 call. I picked Mom's number, because she was the architect, and I wanted her to hear it from me directly, not filtered through Dominic or paraphrased by Piper. She answered on half a ring. "Sol, what have you done?" Her voice was wet, shaking, the sound of a script that had failed with no backup page. I could hear the room behind her, Dominic's voice low and angry, Piper sniffling, a fork set down hard on china. She had me on speaker. Good. I wanted all of them to hear it. "I haven't done anything, Mom." Marlene ran a standard title search. She found my name on a deed that's been recorded for 7 years. She paused the closing, which is exactly what title companies do when there's an ownership issue. My voice stayed level, the way I keep it, presenting a claim finding to an underwriter, facts first, short sentences, no editorializing. "You're ruining this family," she said. Dominic in the background, "This is insane, she hasn't been around in years." I let the noise pass. Then I said, "You told me the wrong date again. You planned a sale around my absence. You sent me a deed disguised as estate paperwork and hoped I wouldn't read it." I read it. Silence. Then Mom, softer, the pivot into guilt. "We were going to tell you, Sol, we were going to split it with you, you would have gotten your share." "When?" I asked. "Before or after closing?" She didn't answer. "You told me the wrong date like last time," I said. "The deed has the right one." Dad's voice, barely above a murmur, cut through the room. "We shouldn't have done it this way." Nobody responded to him. He didn't say anything else. That was his one honest moment. 7 words. Too late, aimed at no one, landing on nothing. I gave them my attorney's information and said any further discussion about the building should go through him. I wished them a Merry Christmas. I meant it. Then I hung up, set the phone face down, and sat in the quiet of my own apartment, where nobody was planning anything behind my back. The closing did not happen. Castle Point Ventures withdrew its offer 4 days later, citing the unresolved title issue and an unwillingness to wait out an uncertain legal timeline. Marlene called my attorney the same week the walkthrough had been scheduled and confirmed the listing was being pulled pending resolution of the co-ownership dispute. Dominic's business loan went into default in February. The bank sent formal notice to both him and Mom, who'd co-signed. Without a lump sum from the sale, there was no way to clear the balance, and the business wasn't generating enough on its own to cover the monthly payments. I didn't learn this from any of them. I learned it from Piper, who called me in March, voice small, and said everything's falling apart. I told her I was sorry things were hard. I meant that too. Then I told her what I'd already told my attorney to communicate. I was willing to discuss the property, but only through a proper mediation with a neutral third party, and only if my ownership was fully acknowledged from the start. No side conversations. No surprise PDFs. No just sign here, sweetheart. The mediation happened in April. Mom, Dominic, Dad, and I sat in a conference room at my attorney's office in Columbus. Piper didn't come, said she couldn't handle it, which was honest of her. Mom cried twice in the first hour. The first time was strategic, the tears she uses to signal she's the victim. The second time looked real, when the mediator laid out the numbers and she understood that the building her own mother-in-law had built a life around was now a problem she couldn't solve without the daughter she'd spent 3 years excluding. Dominic said almost nothing. Dad sat with his hands folded, eyes on the table. I presented 2 options. We sell the property together, proceeds split according to our recorded ownership, 50-50 as the deed stated, with a transparent closing this time. Or I buy out Mom's share at fair market value, appraised independently. I didn't offer a third option. I didn't negotiate against myself. Dominic finally spoke. He leaned forward and said, "Grandma would have wanted us to keep it in the family." I looked at him for a long moment. "Grandma did keep it in the family," I said. "She put my name on it. The question is whether you consider me family." Dominic's jaw worked. "That's not fair," he said. "You weren't around." "I was around exactly as much as I was invited," I said. "Which was never." Mom made a small sound, not quite a word. Dad kept his eyes on the table the whole time, hands folded like a man at a funeral trying not to be noticed. The mediator suggested a break. We took 10 minutes. When we came back, Mom asked if we could just go back to how things were. The mediator asked her to clarify what that meant. She couldn't. Dominic said he needed the number sooner rather than later, given the bank. I said the appraisal would take 2 to 3 weeks either way, and that wasn't something I controlled or was willing to rush. We agreed to sell. The Aldine went back on the market that summer with a different listing agent, not Marlene. Mom refused to work with her again, which was fine by me. It sold in August for $298,000. My share after closing costs came to just over $140,000. I deposited it and didn't touch it. Before the new owners took possession, I drove to Danforth one last time. I parked on Main, walked up to the side entrance, and put the brass key in the lock. It still turned. The door opened into an empty stairwell that smelled like fresh paint and floor polish. I climbed to the 3rd floor and stood in the little apartment where Grandma Opal's rocking chair used to sit by the window, and I didn't cry. I just looked around, said thank you to nobody and everybody, and pulled the door shut behind me. I left the key on the mail slot cover, the only thing of hers that stayed with the building. It was never about the money. They spent 3 holidays making sure I wouldn't find out, coordinating dates I'd never be invited to and doors I'd never walk through. And not one of them stopped to remember that the woman they kept writing off the guest list had been written onto the deed years earlier by the one person in that family who actually saw her. That's my story. 61 messages, 1 reply, and 73 calls I let ring. If this reminded you that your name belongs on your own life, not in someone else's footnote, take that as your sign. Set the boundary today. And if someone you love needs to hear this, share it with them. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.